Sean with Voices of Racing, and I'm speaking with an individual that you've been around the racing world for a long time. Your name is Mike. Lynn, Mike, how you doing today, and where are you located?
I live down in Greenwood in the Center Grove area.
And what was your original start in racing?
Oh, God, when I was about 20 years old in TQ midgets.
All right, so here's a shot of your B-Block Miller that's from 1932. And why don't you give us a little bit of backstory on it?
Well, it took me, when I got the car, it had been totally destroyed in the Guts and Glory League in the early 50s. And all I got was the frame, the cow, and the tail. Everything else had been parted out and sold. And my friend Don Jones, who owned the Brightwood Airport, bought the car to cut it down and make a sprint car out of it. And it never did. And I ended up with a car about 20 years ago.
So this shot right here is at IMS this summer in June, and you were able to run on the track. What was it like being out on IMS, and how many times have you been able to, and here's a shot of the cars on the grid and then out on the track, how many times have you been able to run your car at IMS?
Well, that very car there, that's the 4 times that I ran it that weekend. It's the only time that car I've ran it there, but I've run other cars at the Speedway. Yep.
All right, so right here is it broken down with the engine. This is in your shop and also the wheel well. Why don't you give a little bit of backstory on what you did on the restoration on it?
Well, it took me 15 years just to find the parts and to build the car. And Hammer Arts in Indianapolis actually built the nose and did everything else. And my nephew painted the frame and did the white paint work on it. The lettering was done by the late Jeff Whitaker, who was one of the foremost artists around. And he painted all the numbers, all the lettering and everything on the car. And it's all freehand, no decals. Then on the engine was actually off a car that won the silver edition in the Pan American Road Race in the 50s. And it was pretty expensive, but the other Miller parts I just bought off people offline. The rods I found in Detroit. The crank is a steel crank, came from California. The aluminum flywheel was made in Wisconsin. A guy specializes in them up in Wisconsin. And Ron Miller's engine shop in Shannon, Ohio, the Salty Dog Museum, it's known as. Built the engine. He specializes in these type engines. A little bit of your backstory. Does a lot of work for the Ford Museum. You at IMS
years ago were a pit steward, and you helped get the cars off the track with the big tow trucks. Is that right? Why don't you give us a little history on that?
Well, my first race was when I was 11 years old. I had 67 consecutive races before COVID. And then I worked 35 years on track recovery and on the wreckers. And back then, we actually had to help the guys out of the cars, and we picked the cars up and stuff. And the biggest thing was get them off as quick as we could so the race could continue. And the Speedway's always been known for how fast. But when I was a young man in my 20s and early 30s, I used to go out there, and if it was raining, I was tickled to death because I could go out and run 55 miles an hour around that track as long as I could till we got her dry. And I worked quite a bit out there. And then a couple of years, I put the flags up on top of the grandstands for the Hallmans. And I did security for Mary Hallman 1 year, personal security. But then the last, I don't know, up till COVID, I was the pit steward for about 10 or 12 years for the museum for Ellen Byerly for the vintage cars. And we had anywhere from 60 to 70 to 102 for the 100th running of the Speedway of cars. And it was a lot of work. Line them up, get them out.
Here's a shot of looks like some wins, and I believe this was in Cincinnati.
Yes.
Is that right? Just kind of give me a little bit of the backstory of this.
Yeah, well, this is Cincinnati Elegante, Deal Elegante, or whatever they call it. It was the 47th running of this, and they have 300 and some cars, and they have 3 Governor's Cups that they award. And I won a Governor's Cup. Besides, I won my division also as in the open wheel, and won the Governor's Cup.
All right, so here's a shot of your car broken down, and another one with you in this car. Let's talk about a little bit of the backstory of this. I know there's a cool backstory, and
Yeah,
this is your helmet there.
Yep, this is a Johnny Boyd car that ran in the 500 back in the 60s, and I drove that at Indianapolis a couple of years ago on the oval. Yeah.
And here's a shot of what part of what you do for the job, which is oil tankers.
I was a machine remover and an iron worker for 20 years, and I worked 30 years for Chrysler.
Here's a shot of you running on the track.
I've done about the same thing for Chrysler Corporation.
Or where was this, and who are the other cars in the other shot?
Number 7, that's my 1947 Chris-Craft Midget. That's at Winchester, Indiana. And then the one in the number 41, I'm driving that up Milwaukee on the famous Milwaukee Mile, which is one of the oldest running racetracks in the world. I think it started like in 1906 or something. But that's once again the Johnny Boyd car. And the other car is the Simonized car. They're both owned by a man by the name of Mick Anderson out of New Ritchie, Wisconsin.
So did you happen to come in first place these days you were running against the other vintage guys?
You don't race these cars. They're way too valuable. Yeah.
All right. So here we got the shot. This is also up in Wisconsin. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. And I'm in the blue car at this time. And Jerry Sullivan's in the white car, and the DA Lubricants, a 1959 car from 500. And Bob out of Detroit, Michigan was driving it. And and this was probably 4 years ago. This picture here, I got some.
When was this taken? IMS? You said you got your friends together for this one?
2017, I do believe is when it was. Yeah. And I just had this idea, and I thought it'd be a good deal. And I got my friends, and they brought their cars over, and I got permission from the Speedway and brought them over. We took pictures. And now this same picture has been on calendars and a couple of other things since then.
All right, so this shot, this is about your pennant as far as the flag that was right at the beginning of Victory Lane for the 50-year running in 1971. Give us a little backstory.
1961. When Foyt won his first race, and Mr. Holman come up and asked me to move the photographer stand, which is on a big trailer, and I hooked a wrecker on it, and I seen the pennant on the back of it, and I asked Mr. Holman if I could have it. He said, yeah, as soon as you get it out of here and pull it over on the gravel where nobody could see it, you come back after dark and you can have it. Well, as soon as I pulled it over there, I took the pennant down and folded it up, put it in the wrecker. Yeah.
Next shot. This is you in
another guy's car. This
Mick
is
Anderson and Dr. Robert
Dix.
Decker. Is that right?
Dr. Robert Dix. Fike Plumbing Special. It's a tribute car to Parnelli Jones, the sprint car that he won the National Sprint Car Championship in USAC.
Now, is this Parnelli Jones wearing your helmet and
no, my
driving
uniform.
suit?
It's got on this Greg Elliff, who took care of the Dayton steel wheel car. It's DMJ Industrials in Speedway shop.
DMJ Industrials, that's right.
Yeah, in
And
Speedway.
it's Mike Sheldon, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Mike Sheldon, he's got the shop. So here's your other car. It's right next to your Miller. Describe this one, a little bit of the backstory on it.
This is a 1947 Curtis Craft Midget. Was owned for years by Bob Higman out of Lafayette, Indiana. It was a real winning car. All the big name drivers drove it when it was an Offenhauser powered Curtis Craft. And it was just a phenomenal dirt car, and it lasted for years. The car was actually destroyed at Winchester back in the 50s. And a guy in Terre Haute, Indiana bought the car, and they loaded it on the record, 2 pieces. He sold the Offenhauser engine out of it and bought the fiberglass body, and because the aluminum body was destroyed, and he put the car back together and ran it as a Sesco Chevy for years. And then a guy by the name of Paul Randall bought the car and made it into a vintage car. And that's the way I've been running it. I've had
this one right here, wasn't it AJ?
This is a tribute.
Car from 1959 was built, and then it ran in 61.
Yep, he won his first race in 1960. Yeah.
Yeah, here's a shot of
the car. That's what it's going to look like when it's done.
Shot, right?
Yeah, this is a DA lubricant special, and that's what the car looked like when it's done.
Now, here we've got a shot of a plane that I believe a gentleman that was up in space.
Yeah, an astronaut.
In this plane for your birthday, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. For my 70th birthday, it was a gift to ride in it, and I did get to take the controls from Greenwood to Shelbyville, and then the pilot turned it around. The guy was an astronaut. He turned it around, and then I flew it back, and then he landed it. It was about probably 45, 50-minute flight.
Were you nervous flying the plane at all?
Oh, no.
Well, you've got one suspended in Ray Skillman's Auto Museum down in Greenwood. Why don't you talk about this plane and its history?
Yeah.
And then also the I guess it's the promotional ad to the next one. I know that also was listed on your vehicle, but give us a backstory of both.
Yeah. Well, the red plane was built by an elderly gentleman, and it's really famous. It flew all over the United States. It'd been from Florida to Oshkosh for the national fly-in. Over 20 years it flew up there, and it's been from the farthest northeast corner of the United States to the farthest southwest corner of the United States on numerous times. The guy was a real avid flyer. I inherited the car from Don Jones, and he owned the Brightwood Airport, and he bought this car after it had been destroyed and was going to cut it down and make a sprint car out of it. He owned the Brightwood Airport, and this picture that you see here is a copy that was copied out of the 1935 Indianapolis Star News, and I put this for the delivery on the car and what it was, and that's why it's called the Brightwood Airport Special.
That's a cool little bit of history. So
yeah,
here we're taking it back. This is in Winchester Raceway Park, is that right? And
this shot here is at Winchester for the Dry Power 400.
Okay.
And I ran 400 laps up there, and I finished 7th in the first one, and the second one that I ran a year later, I finished 9th.
How many cars were running in that race?
Oh my God. For the first one, there was like 80 cars came, and they only started the 32 fastest, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
80 cars. Yeah.
Now it looks like there's a trophy sitting on top of this one. Who's the people in the photo, and what's the victory that you attained at that moment?
This is at Raceway Park, and this is the only fast seat I ever won. This is in 1967 Chevelle with a checkered flag. Court Tomasek next to me. Tommy Hill, who is a lifelong friend from the time I was 11 years old. He was my chief mechanic. The guy standing up behind him is Bobby Oliver. He was another one of my mechanics. And the guy with the red jacket is Bill Morgan. He was a fabricator, done a lot of welding and stuff on my cars. And He's a really good fabricator.
Did you guys spend a lot of time together on the weekends going to different tracks?
Oh yeah.
All
I've raced in 14 different states, and that don't include the ones now that I've raced in or driven in since I've been in vintage cars. Because I've raced from Phoenix all the way to Pocono, Pennsylvania, from Road America down south to Nashville, and I've
What would
raced
you say are, besides IMS, what are some of your more favorite tracks to run on?
Well, actually, Indianapolis Raceway Park, Winchester, Indiana, Salem, Indiana. I liked Madison, Wisconsin, where I was leading a race and had a blowout in an ARCA race in my 72 Chevelle. I didn't give you a picture of it, but that was the last car. And with that car, I ran 14 different states. I ran Louisville, the Salem 500 twice and finished it both times. I ran the Louisville 500 twice, and I finished it both times, once in my car and once in another fellow's car. But I ran Tri-County. I ran 2 NASCAR races. I qualified for 2 USAC races, but had car failure. Didn't make the race. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to take it to, I think this is your son, is that right?
Right. This
And
is my youngest.
You guys are in Anderson?
Anderson, yeah. This is my youngest son, Jeffrey, and he drove my midget that day, and I drove my Indy car.
And what does Jeffrey do? And has he been able to go out with you a lot on a lot of different weekend runs? And what's kind of his passion of racing?
Yeah, no, his isn't as bad as his older brother. His older brother, we had a race truck, and he raced it together. I raced it for a couple of years. Yeah.
All right. So this next shot, if you could give us a little background on the car number 10, and who's with you.
This was a promotional thing that we had at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and this is Parnelli Jones driving the Dayton Steel Wheel Special, which he didn't drive in the race, but he did drive in the race and won the 500. Very famous race driver, won a lot of races. But the guy with the red hat is Donnie Bacelis, who still maintains a shop in Gasoline Alley.
Okay.
And the guy in the black shirt is me helping Parnelli get his safety belts on. And the guy with the reddish hair is Parnelli's publicist and stuff. But Parnelli is wearing my ARCA uniform, which he wore on many occasions. The helmet he has on is not my helmet, but he wore my helmet every time he was here for many years. And when he led the 500 in his 1963 winning car, he had my uniform and my helmet on.
So has he been able to give you some race memorabilia items since he's been able to wear your suits? Has he given you some of his own?
No, he hasn't. Dana Minkum bought his collection, everything he had, and had it at an auction here in Indianapolis this year. And my friend Ray Skillman bought the Mario Andretti car for $2.2 million, but we spent $4.4 million that day raised money. His son Billy is the one that spent it. I didn't have anything to do with spending his money.
Wow.
I was just taking notes.
All right, so here's a shot back at IMS. I know you're in the front here with your arm up. Is that right? And you're also the first.
No,
blue.
that shot there is at Salem, Indiana. Yeah, in my midget. Yeah, and the shot at IMS is with me and in the blue car, and Jimmy Delamar, who was Parnelli Jones's publisher or business manager and team coordinator for ever since he got famous, and he still works for him. And they built this car, the little white coupe, and that car ran all over Oswego and all what ran everywhere is that car's capable of running 200 mile an hour. And me and him was leading the field, and you can't see part of the field's way
All right,
back
so
up
this
on the
next
other
shot
corner. We got away
is
from him
of
a
your
little bit.
grandson Corbin.
Yeah,
And was this at IMS or
yeah, in the museum.
where was and how old is Corbin?
He's 9 years old now. That picture was a couple of years ago. He was there for some special event. I don't even remember what it was.
All right, and then this next shot here is basically the car you were running on the track, and then another buddy of yours' cars. Why don't you give a little bit of a backstory to that?
Yeah, this number 63 car is a real famous champ car. Jack Hewitt was the driver of that car, and it won the last Thursday Night Thunder on ESPN. And it's really a famous car, run a lot of races. And Kenny had it restored, and we've ran it. And matter of fact, it's being restored right now. But it's a real famous car. It won a lot of races with Jack Hewitt.
All right, so this next shot, if you could just kind of give a little bit of backstory to the gentleman. I think you said this was the guy who ran the car originally.
Yep, and he won. He's now the second most winning champ car driver of the Silver Crown division. But Cody Swanson has since passed him in the last year. But he had like, I don't know, 40 some wins. Yeah, and he's in a
Jack Hewitt. Is that right?
Yeah, and he's in a roadster at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
All right, so now we're going to span some generations. So this is your grandfather and your granddaughter.
Yep.
And your granddaughter, you said she's a registered nurse. Her name's Allison. Is that right?
Yep.
And your grandfather, he used to run around and basically do custom work for people at their houses on their cars. If you could kind of give a little bit of his backstory. And
he also worked at the Speedway during the month of May, and all he did was brakes and clutches. And yet in that truck, he had a grinder where he ground the brake drums, made sure they was true, and he also fit the shoes. He grind the asbestos shoes. And of course, he died of cancer, grinding in the back of that truck, all them shoes and clutches and stuff over the years. Besides, he did customers' trucks or clutches on their cars. Because back in the day, everybody had a clutch before automatic transmissions came along. But yeah, he was a very successful mechanic and businessman.
Do you remember growing up, like what are some of the first things you started working on with him, being the grandson?
Well, he actually moved to Florida in 1951, and we lived here, but he had a big roller jack, and back then they were a ratchet jack, and they had like a ratchet tooth, and I was playing with that all the time. He said, "You're going to keep messing with that, you're going to cut a finger off." Finally got me to stop playing with that ratchet jack, but I thought it was
and what was it like the first time you were able to be at the
great
track,
big iron toy,
helping out with the towing and whatnot? And how old were you when that happened?
Actually, you're supposed to be 21, but I was like 16 years old, and I would just kept the trucks clean and took stuff around to the guys. We had like altogether we had like 11 wreckers out there, and only 5 of them belonged to Eddie's Wrecker Service, who I worked for. Eddie's Wrecker Service and Demery's
All right,
Radio
so just
Service.
in general, what would you say that you really love about being out on the track or being behind the scenes? Just kind of the love of the sport.
Yeah, I just love the competition. I love being on the track. I love driving. I still do today. I just drove it to Nashville Grand Prix this weekend, and in 96-degree weather with a heat index of over 110. But my car ran really good, and it's not designed for that kind of racing. And it was a real handful. It has mechanical 2-wheel brakes on the back, and it's a handful. next run is in 2 weeks at the St. Louis IndyCar race at St. Louis on the 1 mile track over there. And then I got a couple other small events for my midget at other places, but then I'm going with Roger Penske and a couple other people put together this Elegante in Detroit, and I think it's in late September. Can't remember for sure, but we're up there and we're at an old proving ground for I don't remember what it was for Oldsmobile or what, but it's a real nice deal. And last year it wasn't a real big turnout, but this year it's going to be, and I think Jay Leno's involved in it, the mayor of Detroit, and there's a lot of race people that's involved in this also. They brought cars from Florida and California for it last year, but they only had a couple of cars to run on the course. And this year they went to Indy Vintage Registry to bring as many cars as they can so they can put on more of a show.
That's great. So are you looking forward? Are you have any other cars on the horizon yourself that you're going to be looking to acquire?
No, not really. I can't really afford what I've got now, but I'm going to finish the Foyt car. That's my next project, and I've got 4 other cars in the shop that I work on too for Mr. Sheldon. So I'm pretty busy with him.
Okay. Well, I thank you for your time. I know that you've got a lot of history within the sport itself. And even one of the first people I was connected with was Charlie Patterson. You've known Charlie for a while.
Oh, yeah,
and a lot
for years.
A lot of the other guys, I know he'll love seeing this. And but just stay in the line, Mike, and I'm going to close this one out and look forward to seeing you at St. Louis and you being able to share your car stories basically with the world.
Yeah, you're going to come to St. Louis, you say?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Give you a little free advice. If you're going to stay the night, you want to make your reservations now because they jack them up for IndyCar.